All right, we are on the bottom of Lamed at base 30b4. Let's just start from the Gemara again. Itmar, we learned Balchov, a creditor who has a mortgage on a borrower's property, right? So basically, what happens is that there is Ruvain lends Shimon money. Shimon gives collateral. Let's say he gives property as collateral. He doesn't actually give him the property, but he says, if I don't pay you back this loan, you will get this piece of property. Okay, so Limafreu Hugove, that land or whatever it is that was given for collateral for the loan, that is going to be collected retroactively. V'Rava Amar Mikan Lavahu Gove. Rava says no. The collection of the property comes from the time that the loan is defaulted. Again, let's just read before we go further, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, Ruvain lends Shimon money. Okay, we'll start writing over here because we're going to be writing a little bit. So Ruvain, let's do it this way. Ruvain lends Shimon money. Okay, so Ruvain gives money to Shimon, right? And so what Shimon says, if I don't pay you back, you're going to get this piece of land, right? So now the date of the debt comes in, right? The date, he's supposed to pay it back September 22nd, or whatever, 20th, and he does not pay it back. So this land goes to Reuven. Everyone agrees to that. The question is, from when does this land, or whatever it is that he designated, when does it start belonging to Reuven? Does it only happen when the loan no longer gets paid back? Or is it as if it went right away, and it's just that Shimon has the ability to kind of buy it back, when he pays off the loan? That's the question. Is it considered Reuven's right away, or is it only considered Reuven's after the loan is defaulted? Okay? And we'll see what the ramifications are. Okay, so kol heicha da'aktish love, when in a situation where the borrower went ahead and if let's say Reuven went, Shimon went ahead and he was makdish, he consecrated the land that belongs to him, right? So Reuven borrows money from Shimon, and then he goes ahead and he says, this piece of land I'm going to give to the Beis HaMikdash, right? So he does that. After
the loan has already happened.
After the loan is, but before the debt, before it's due. So he goes ahead, right? Reuven, Shimon borrows money, and then the next day he goes ahead and he says, I'm giving this piece of land, which is meant to be the collateral, it's meant, right? It has a lien on this land. He says, I'm going to give it to the Beis HaMikdash. V'zabin love. Or he goes ahead and he sells this land, right? Shimon's tied on cash. He borrows money from Reuven, and then he sells this land to Levi, right? So Kuli Amal Pligi does a mal b'vitarif. Everyone agrees that Reuven can come along and collect this. It's his. In other words, if Shimon defaults on the loan, he had no rights to sell this land, right? And therefore, Shimon is clearly allowed to go ahead. Reuven is clearly allowed to go ahead and take this land for himself. Yeah. In other words, he had no right to sell it, right? Vasi malvo farik, okay, and the lender may come and redeem it, right? So either he redeems it or he takes it from the Levi that Shimon sold it to. That's straightforward. It's not as taught in the Mishnah. Mosif o dinar, the creditor adds another dinar from his pocket, upodes nechasam elu, and he redeems the properties. In other words, in a situation, if Shimon sold this land to Levi, then Reuven could go ahead to Levi and say, hey, Shimon owed me this piece of land because he never paid me back on the loan. Give me back the land. Everyone agrees. If he went ahead and he gave it to Hektish, then Reuven has to give like an extra $1 because you can't just take, whenever you redeem something from Hektish, you can't just do it for the actual value, right? So basically what you do is you add an extra $1 and then you get it back from Hektish because you can't just redeem it for the face value. It has to be something extra whenever you are redeeming from Hektish. But the bottom line is this land certainly goes back to Reuven. Got it? Make sense? Okay. Keep ligi. When do they argue? Dezabin malve. When Reuven goes ahead and sells it, okay, the kaddish malve, or the lender, meaning Reuven, goes ahead and is makdish it consecrates it. Abaye amr l'mafreu hu gove. Okay, so let's say Reuven goes ahead, he lends money to Shimon, and then he says, this land that Shimon is going to owe me, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Beis HaMikdash. Or he goes ahead and makes a sale. Question is, and then it happens to be Shimon defaults on the loan, right? So on September 1st, right, he goes ahead and Reuven there's a sale, okay? Now, he sells the land which is still in Shimon's technical property, right? Because the loan has been defaulted. September 15th comes along, the loan is defaulted. The question is it a good sale or is it good hektish, right? That's the question, right? So he did the sale right now, even before the loan he defaulted on the loan. The question is it a good sale? Is it a good hektish? Even now, when the time comes, right? So what do we say? Abaye says that since it's retroactive, it is therefore so kevan demata zimne lo pari. So once September 15th came and the borrower defaulted on the loan, so retroactively it turns out, says Abaye, granted he sold it on September 1st, but since September 15th he defaulted, retroactively on September 1st was actually his. Makes sense, right? Rava v'shaper akdish v'shaper zabin, and therefore the consecration was effective and the sale was effective. Rava amar mikanu labahu goveh. Okay, and Rava says no. It only becomes his on September 5th, and therefore it is not a good sale. It is not a good loan. Why? He says kivan de'ilu havele zuzeh. Why? Because since had Shimon had cash on hand, he could have just went ahead and said, "Here's your cash, and I want to keep my lands." Right? Rava's arguing at the end of the day, how can you say it's retroactive? At the end of the day, until the point that I defaulted on a loan, I could have just given you money. I could have given you money and it would have remained mine. So, ishtakach tahashta kakani. The fact that granted I didn't do it, but until September 15th, I could have given you money. So what that means is that, until that date, it wasn't your piece of land.
That's true with anything that's retroactive.
What do you mean?
He's saying there's a problem with the concept of retroactivity. It's until that point, it wasn't anything, but once it gets to that point, we can deduce that it should be retroactive. I mean,
I think the difference over here is it's not just that he's not negating the notion of retroactivity in general. What he's saying over here is that if let's say we had a deal that on September 15th retroactively would go to you, 100%. The point is that since there's a trigger, there's probably a better word. There's like an out to this retroactivity. That's why it doesn't just work. In other words, if it was just set up to be retroactive, the Torah acknowledges there's a number of places where we say Breira and things like that. Rava's not negating retroactivity. What he's saying over here is that since there is an out to that retroactivity, since I could go ahead and pay my way out of it until that point, it's not your classic case of retroactivity. Retroactivity is there's nothing to do about it. It's just that time goes backwards. Over here, during that time period, I have an exit. And since I have that exit, you can't really call it, it's not a clean case of retroactivity. I agree with you, meaning you could say, if you're a retroactivity purist, that's the point. Yeah, yes.
It is, as we pointed out in American law,
yes.
This is all determined by documentation.
Are there documents? Or is this like a default?
It is a default. This is a default. Yeah, this is all defaults. Your question is, can you override it?
Right.
Probably you could override anything in a contract, but this is a default. Yeah, yes.
It's interesting that it should stay at the level of being hektish.
Why?
Because we're focusing on the person in this case, not on the land. The land was made holy.
Yeah, but it was. I can't go ahead and say, Max, your house is holy now. It's meaningless. If it's not Bershusi.
Well, at the time you do it, you do own it.
Well, that's the question. Do I own it now? That's exactly the question. But I can't go ahead and be makdish all your stuff. It just doesn't work.
So what if it gets to the point of where I know we have to keep moving.
Yeah.
What if you get to the point where you say, you know what, forget it. You don't have to pay me back anymore. I forgive it.
Okay, fine. New question. But
so
but I mean, it's a similar question. It's the same question.
But you don't have to reactivate that. It was done, it was done.
Well, that's the question. Because when there's an exit ramp to the retroactivity, thank you for Ross pushing me to make up this weird formulation. Then will that impact the ownership at this point? Okay, says the Gemara. Umiyam Rava Hachi, did Rava really say this? Rami Barchama. Okay, here it's going to get a little more complicated, but bear with me. We got this. Ruvain Shemachar Sadal Shema Bachrais. Okay, so Ruvain sells a field. Okay, let's change the case a little bit. Ruvain sells a field to Shimon with a chrais. So chrais means, so Ruvain goes ahead and sells the land to Shimon and says that chrais means that Ruvain's saying, if for whatever reason, like my creditors come to you and collect this land, I will pay you back, right? I'm going to put in the brackets, like if need be, I will pay you back with a different piece of land. Okay? Happens to be Ruvain doesn't really have another piece of land, but he's still saying, I will make this sale whole, right? Basically says, if sale doesn't go forward, if my creditors come and collect from you, Shimon, I'm going to pay you back. So again, Ruvain Shemachar Sel Shimon Bachrais, Uskafin Laban Milven. Now the problem with Shimon didn't have cash on hand, so he goes ahead and he doesn't give him money, but he gives him, there's a loan over here, right? He doesn't, that's why it's dotted line. He doesn't give him cash straight out, which would be a full-fledged sale. He says, listen, I don't have the full $2 million to buy this piece of land. I'm going to pay you $100,000, whatever, I'll pay you $2 million in a year from now, right? So he owes him money, and there's a debt over here, okay? And then Umeis Ruvain. Now Ruvain dies, okay? Vasabal chov de Ruvain v'tarfle mishimon. Okay, and now Ruvain happened to have borrowed money from other people, okay? From Levi, let's call him, okay? He borrowed money from Levi. Okay, the problem is, they come to Ruvain to state, there's nothing here. So what do? They go to Shimon, right? They go to Shimon because Shimon is someone who has, after Ruvain borrowed money from Levi, right? And now there's no money. So basically what happens is any sales, any things that Ruvain does after borrowing this money is now, what's the word? It's there's a lien, whatever it is. But basically this land, right, there's like a lien on this land, so to speak, for Levi because he owes Levi money, right? Again, first Reuven borrowed money from Levi. So now everything Reuven had at that point is subject to pay back this loan. And then Reuven goes and sells to Shimon, okay? And now Levi basically says, I'm going to go to Shimon to collect what's really mine. Right? So let's keep on going further. Okay, now Shimon, instead of giving the land, which was really dedicated to this loan, right? This was the land that was going to back up the loan. He goes ahead and he gives money to Levi to pay off the loan.
The same money that he was supposed to pay to Reuven initially?
I mean, it's money's fungible, but money's money. Money's not the same. There's no same money. So basically, he goes ahead and he pays Levi. He pays Levi the money that is owed so that he can keep this land. Okay. Dinahu. The law is Reuven Shimon. Now the children of Reuven, the orphans, could come ahead and say, okay, our father left us movable property that he had by you. Okay. And movable property of orphans is not mortgaged. Okay, meaning what could happen is like this. Now Shimon wants to go back to Reuven and Reuven's estate and say, hey, I just gave him all this money. I want to be paid back because your father sold me this land with achrayus, by taking responsibility. What's the English word? There's a word for it. Guarantee. Okay, yeah, perfect. So basically the guarantee. So I want to, yeah. So Shimon, I think whatever, it's a more technical term, but yeah, guarantee is exactly what we're looking for. Shimon basically goes to Reuven's estate now and says, hey, I want you to pay me back for the, for what was owed, right? Now Reuven's orphans say, okay, but listen, all we have is cash. And there's a rule that orphans do not have to give cash from the states. Okay, it's a special rule. We're not going to get into the why right now. But basically, when you go to collect from the states, the only thing that is going to be subject to the creditors is actual lands and not money. So basically, Shimon says, "Hey, listen, Reuven, I want to be paid back." They say, "Well, we have cash. All we have is cash right now because we don't have any land. There's no land left, and therefore we don't owe you any money." Shimon basically gets messed over because
he owes them.
He owes the children.
Yeah.
He owes the children the money. You're saying he's going to get most over 3 ways. Okay. So let's see. So he says like this. So our father, okay. So fine. V'amar Rava, but Rava says, Ipikech Shimon, right? Ipikech Shimon. If Shimon was smart, Maglu Ara. Okay. Then what he should do is as follows. In other words, let me say better. Reuven, to your point, David, Shimon owes Reuven money. So basically what happens over here is Shimon really has to be paying money back to Reuven. And now, but he says, but Reuven, listen, Reuven's estate, listen, I bought this land, I should be getting something back. And Reuven's estate says, but you gave us cash. All we have is cash right now, and therefore we can't help you. I'm sorry, it's just cash, right? But Rava says if he was smart, you know what he should do? He should not pay them back with cash. He should pay them back with land, because if he pays back with land, then he could say, okay, you have land? Lands, I'm allowed to collect from you, and basically he could more or less keep his land. Right? You with me? A little bit, right? So basically instead of paying back with cash, in which case they'd say, now you're just completely messed over, right? Because you paid money to him, you paid money to him, and basically you paid twice for this piece of land, right? Instead, if Shimon was smart, he'd pay the money over here, fine, and that's the money that he technically owed Reuven, and then he should give them the land, right? Give them the land and say, you have land, fantastic, now it goes right back to me, right? Assuming there's no other creditors. Yes. Assuming there's no other creditors. Okay. So, Rava Shimon was smart. Maglu Ara. He should have Reuven's children collect the land from the payments. And then he collected it right back. If orphans collected land as a payment of a debt, then the creditor is allowed to collect. They could collect land. You can't collect cash. Okay. So now, who said that last statement? Rava. So if Rava actually holds, not like we said above, and he actually holds that you could collect that the mortgage property is retroactively owned by is owned. That's the reason that's the reason that you're able to go ahead and collect the land from the orphans. Because it's as though they had collected it during their father's lifetime. Okay, and therefore it's part of their father's estate. Meaning, what land are you really able to get from? What land are we able to take? We're able to take land that really belonged to the father. But the problem is that the father didn't own this land when he died, right? But if you say retroactively, when a loan takes place, then retroactively the land as if it was always his, then we say, oh, it was always his. It was the father's land, therefore I'm allowed to collect from it, right? So Eli Yamras Bikan Labau Gove. But if you, Rava, as you told us earlier, that say that the collected mortgage, it's as if you only get it now, then Amai Chos V'Gova Samehen. Hayab Command to Zavin Yasmin Dami. It's as though the orphans bought property on their own. If the orphans buy property, it wouldn't be mishubit, it wouldn't be a guarantee, right? In other words, this only makes sense if you say it's as if the land, which was part of what was owed to Ruvain, which was part of this whole loan, really retroactively went to Ruvain. That's if you hold these retroactivity in terms of loan. But if not, then it's like these orphans go ahead and buy some new land now. That's not meshubit. That's not a guarantee to the loan. It doesn't make any sense. So Shani Haslamar says, no, there's a difference. The Amr Lahu, because Shimon can say, Shimon, the guy who's trying to not be so messed over, could say, just as I mortgaged my property to your father, okay, I also mortgaged to your father's creditor, okay, which is himself. Okay, basically the point is that since he basically said, look, when we made this loan, I mortgaged my land to your father's creditors, but I am one of your father's creditors because I sold this land, and this land technically should be the land should be coming to me, and therefore it's like a long way. Basically, this land was already in my property. This land was already in my property. It's already part of something that is something that really should be going to myself. In other words, when the loan happens, everyone agrees there is land that gets mortgaged to the people that Reuven owed money to. But technically, Shimon is also someone who he owes money to. It's not your typical, retroactive loan. The point is over here, he's committing himself to all the creditors, which includes himself. Rabbi Nassan is Rabbi Nassan taught the time of Nassan Omer minayil noshe bechaver mana bechaver bechaver shemotzium ezev nos lazeh tamalo Nassan lasher ashalom. What that means is as follows. Let's say I borrow money from, let's say Reuven borrows money from Shimon, and Shimon borrows money from Levi. So Reuven go ahead and collect from Levi. In other words, you can just skip Shimon entirely. It's as if we go to the person who ultimately has those funds, we could skip that middle person. And that's what we're saying over here. This is not your typical case of retroactivity. The bottom line is, what he's arguing is that at the end of the day, I am one of your father's creditors. I'm one of your father's creditors, and therefore, it basically was mine all along, and which is not your typical case. Okay? What time is it? 3? A tiny bit more. It's not. Okay, 3183. It's not. This is where we're ultimately leading to, okay? So basically we're coming back to Rabba's view. We learned to the Mishnah that a non-Jew who lent a Jew money before Pesach, right? A non-Jew who lent a Jew money before Pesach, Achar Pesach Mutter Bahana. Okay, so again, the non-Jew lends money to the Jew, and the Jew gives chametz as a collateral. Okay? So what happens? Achar Pesach Mutter Bahana. We said after, and then he defaults on the loan. Okay? So after Pesach, that chametz is something which is permitted in benefit. That was our Mishnah. If you want to say it's retroactive, then it makes sense. Then it makes sense. The chametz is permitted in benefits. Why? Because retroactively, the chametz was owned by who on Pesach? Again, the non-Jew gave money to the Jew gave him chametz, and then the Jew defaults on the loan. So who owned the chametz retroactively? The non-Jew. So that chametz is 100% mutter bana. But if you say, like Rava said, that it starts from now, so that means that who owned the chametz until he defaulted on the loan? The Jew. So my mutter now, why is it permitted in benefit? It was in the possession of the Jew. So the Gemara says, shirhinu etzlo. This is not just a regular case of retroactivity. The reason that it's permitted in benefit over here is because he did something extra, which is he deposited the chametz with the non-Jew. That is not what Rava was talking about. Rava was talking about a situation where it stays in my property, but retroactively it's considered yours. If I already give it over to you, that is not your classic case of retroactivity, and there it actually does belong to the non-Jew is holding on to possession because you already did the action. Meaning, retroactivity, if it was sitting in my house, retroactivity is not enough to make it as if it's yours. But if I put it in your house, it's not just retroactivity alone that's at play, it's physically in your possession, and therefore it was considered to belong by the non-Jew even before the loan was defaulted. Have a great day.